For example, in Mexico, you know that kidnapping and ransom, security risk, operational risks are very high. In Nigeria, kidnapping and ransom has become pretty rampant. It's now not just a Niger Delta phenomenon, it's a nationwide phenomenon.
To the issue, for this interview, last week the UK International Development Secretary Justin Green announced that the UK will be stopping direct aid to South Africa in 2015. Looking at the numbers, do you think South Africa can stand on its own without direct aid from the UK?
Yes. Well, the total aid in question is not more than $60 to $150 million. But it is the symbolism that a country that has income per capita of $8,000 should not really qualify for ODA, Overseas Development Assistance. What it means is that Britain is going to redirect that aid to more deserving recipients of aid. It is believed that South Africa has the resources to actually underwrite that kind of aid. But South Africa is not one nation. South Africa is 3 nations. There's the Afrikaans nation, which own the economic resources. There's the upper class of the African National Congress, which is the black empowerment movement. Those are in control of government, and also by nature of control of government actually have significant resources endowed on them. But then there's the ordinary black South African in the settlements. Unemployment rate in that particular range, in that particular group, is about 46%. There's work to be done. But don't forget, the African National Congress was a liberation movement turned into a political party and now turned into an establishment. That transition takes time for it to actually entrench itself and become internalized by the people, that we are no longer just freedom fighters.
Charity organizations in South Africa say that this move will harm projects in the country. The government, of course, has also spoken out against it. But if this is happening to one leading African economy, it's the same fate coming for the remaining 4, isn't it?
Definitely. That's the reality. In Nigeria, for example, we've been talking about rebasing the economy for whatever purposes. Yes, it gives you greater accuracy in terms of measuring your GDP. But when you rebase the economy, it is envisaged that Nigeria's GDP, nominal GDP, will go from $300 to about $400 billion. You gradually begin to actually move away from being a very low income, highly indebted, we are not highly indebted, very low income economy, to probably a more likely candidate to become a medium income economy. The meaning of that is that some of the overseas development assistance that will naturally accrue to Nigeria will be cut off and passed to other countries who are less fortunate. With a population of 165 million estimated, it's very difficult. Any amount of aid that is cut off will be difficult. Nigeria has 4 sources of revenue. 1, the oil and gas revenue. 2, diaspora remittances. 3, aid. And 4, trade flows. So each of these items, even though some of them may not be as significant as the other, help to go along. It goes a long way to support people, because people at the bottom of the pyramid in Nigeria have a very difficult time. Even though we say we have an income per capita of $1,500, there are people in these countries whose income are less than $300 a year.
There's also the argument that giving aid to economic powerhouses like South Africa is an abuse of taxpayers' money in the UK.
I don't think it's a waste. It's a question of prioritizing. Would you give it to South Africa where the income per capita is 8,000, even though there are people within South Africa who are suffering? Or would you send it to Botswana or Zimbabwe or Zambia where the income per capita is only $700 or $800 per head? It's not a question of saving it for Britain. It's a question of diverting it from where it's not badly needed to where it is desperately needed.
But what about the argument that giving aid to these countries, of course, affords the leaders to live a more luxurious lifestyle, because this aid, of course, is taking care of things like education, healthcare, and poverty alleviation programs?
It is true that many African countries, the number 1 priority of the leadership is corruption. And whether you give aid or not, corruption will take place. Corruption is a social cankerworm in the country. By giving them aid, you even, you encourage them to continue the exploitation of their own people. But by not giving them aid, you think that it will force them to use the money for the people. But the reality is that even if it's the last dollar that is available, and there's only $1 available, they will first use it to satisfy their own personal corruption needs before they satisfy any other person. So the answer to corruption in leadership in Africa is not to starve them of aid money, but to change the leadership. There's need to change leadership from mediocre and corrupt leadership to become efficient and dedicated leadership to the people. The social contract says that you lead on behalf of the people. You go after power to alter the lives of people. You don't go after power to make money for yourself. It's not a commercial enterprise.
So in other words, you don't really support, or you think this is a catch-22 situation, whether you give aid or you do not give aid. Either way, the situation is still the same.
Absolutely. The reduction of aid does not in any way curtail corruption. Corruption is a problem of its own. Aid could actually accentuate it because there's more money on the table, so you can take some more out. But the problem of corruption is that it's a social malady, it's a disease of the mind. There's nothing you can do. Even if, first and foremost, no matter how much money you give to these guys, they will never be satisfied, right? So you have to actually address the fundamental character and personality disorder of the African leader who does not know that his responsibility, first and foremost, to serve people rather than serve himself. That is the problem, sir. But it's a problem of development. I think even African leaders who pass through that phase, right now they are new to the game. And whether some people say democracy, well, democracy has not solved that problem. This problem is fundamental. So we are going to have to deal with it. And in China, they're extreme, they execute people. In some places, there are also things. But I think that public accountability and the actions of civil society by saying that we will not have any of this corruption is what is going to solve this problem. Not military coups, not the stopping of it. Those things will probably help it in one way or the other. But when civil society says that if you're a leader and you are corrupt and we see you amassing wealth and all of that, then we would begin to see people now, people in leadership being careful as to why they should do that. You talked about income inequality in Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have over 175 private jets, while general aviation, that is all of the airlines put together, have about 80 jets. In other words, the 150 million or 160 million people in Nigeria are flying around in 80 jets, while 200 Nigerians who are wealthy and well-to-do, including government officials, are flying around in their private jets. That tells you the distortion, right, and the dislocation, the dysfunctionality of the kind of government that operates in African countries.
Mr. Rewane, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Amarachi.
Thanks for watching Diplomatic Channel. Remember, you can reach us via email, Facebook, and on Twitter. We'll see you again next week. I am Amarachi Ubani.